72 hours. That was all that stood between Sergeant First Class Corinne O'Yelleran and the first Christmas with her family in 3 years. She sat alone in the armory at Forward Operating Base Resolute, running an oiled cloth along the barrel of her M2010 rifle, humming Silent Night under her breath while snow piled against the frosted windows. The weapon was already clean. It had been clean for 2 days. But Corinne cleaned it again because that was what she did when she was nervous, when she was excited, when she was anything at all. Her hands knew this rifle better than they knew her own face. Before we continue with the story, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from this Christmas season. Maybe you know someone in the military who has had to spend the holidays far from home. The armory door creaked open and a young private stepped inside, stomping snow from his boots. He stopped when he saw her, that familiar hesitation she had grown accustomed to over 4 years of deployments. The only woman in the operational unit. The sniper who did not smile. "Sorry, Sergeant," he said. Thought the armory was empty. Corinne gestured to the workbench across from her. "Plenty of room, Private." He nodded and settled onto a stool, pulling out his service pistol for cleaning. She watched him fumble with the slide release and said nothing. He would figure it out or he would not. That was not her business. Her phone buzzed against the metal table. She glanced at the screen and her chest tightened. "Mom." She set down the rifle and answered. "Baby girl." Her mother's voice came through weak and tired, the chemotherapy stealing more of her strength each week. "Your brother is driving me crazy with wedding preparations. He changed the flower arrangements 3 times yesterday." Corinne smiled, something she rarely did on this base. "Tell Deo I will handle him when I get there." "You promise you are coming?" "You promised last year, too." The words landed like shrapnel. Last year she had promised. Last year a mission had pulled her away 72 hours before her flight, and she had spent Christmas watching tracers light up a valley in Helmand Province instead of watching her family open presents. "I promise, Mama. My bags are packed. Flight leaves the 24th. A pause on a line. Her mother's breathing sounded labored. Corinne pressed the phone harder against her ear. "Mama, how are you feeling?" "Really? I am fine. The doctors say the treatment is working." That was not what the doctors said. Corinne had called them directly 2 weeks ago. The cancer had spread. Treatment was managing symptoms now, not curing anything. This might be the last Christmas. That was what the doctor had actually said. "I will be there," Corinne said. "I love you." She ended the call and stared at the phone for a long moment. The private across from her had given up on his pistol and was watching her with something like concern. "You okay, Sergeant?" "Fine, Private." She returned to her rifle, but her hands were not steady now. Inside her kit bag, tucked into a pocket she never opened, was a patch with 2 initials stitched in black thread. Vucha Wendelhach, her spotter, her friend, dead 18 months now because she had frozen when it mattered most. She touched the bag without opening it, a ritual of guilt she performed every day. The armory door banged open and Sergeant Yuki Tanaka strode in, snow dusting her black hair, her expression tight with urgency. "Frost," she said, using the call sign Corinne had earned during a winter deployment in the Karengal. "We have a problem." Corinne set down her rifle. "What kind of problem?" Tanaka glanced at the private, then back to Corinne. Chief Nasiri's team missed their check-in. They're 6 hours overdue. The name hit her like a physical blow. Tariq Nasiri, the SEAL team leader who had defended her when no one else would. The man who knew the truth about what happened to Wendell Hatch. Where were they operating? Corinne asked, already knowing the answer would be bad. Karengal Ridge, deep in hostile territory. Tanaka lowered her voice. Master Sergeant Kinnick is assembling a rescue element. He has already made it clear you are not invited. Corinne looked at her packed bags sitting in the corner of the armory. 72 hours. Her mother's labored breathing. Her brother's wedding. The promise she had made and broken before. Then she looked at the mission board on the wall, at the grid coordinates marking Nasiri's last known position, at the red zone surrounding it indicating hostile activity. Her rifle was still warm in her hands. The Tactical Operations Center buzzed with controlled chaos when Corinne pushed through the door. Banks of monitors cast blue light across the faces of intelligence analysts hunched over keyboards. Radio chatter filled the air, overlapping voices calling out grid coordinates and signal intercepts. At the center of it all stood Master Sergeant Brock Kinnick, a man built like a concrete barrier with a voice to match. Corinne approached him with Tanaka at her side. Kinnick did not look up from the map table, where he was tracing possible extraction routes with a thick finger. Master Sergeant, Corinne said, I want in on the rescue element. Kinnick's hand stopped moving. He raised his eyes slowly, and the contempt in them was familiar. She had seen that look from him every day for the past 11 months. Negative, he said. The word was flat and final. I know that terrain better than anyone on this base. I spent 3 months in the Korengal. I know every ridge, every valley, every goat path the Taliban uses for movement. Kinnick straightened to his full height, a head taller than her. Around them, conversations quieted. Analysts pretended not to watch while watching intently. What you know, Sergeant, is how to sit behind a scope and squeeze a trigger from safe distance. This is a close quarters extraction in hostile territory. It requires operators who can move fast and hit hard. Not someone who needs to set up a nest and wait for the perfect shot. Heat rose in her chest, but she kept her voice level. With respect, Master Sergeant, Chief Nasiri's team is surrounded. They need overwatch. They need precision fire to cover their extraction. That is exactly what I provide. What you provide, Kinnick said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a growl that only she and Tanaka could hear, is a liability. You want to know what happens when women get attached to combat elements? Men do. They die because they are busy protecting someone who should not be there in the first place. They die because they hesitate when they should be shooting. They die because feelings get in the way of fighting. Corinne held his gaze without blinking. And you know this from personal experience, Master Sergeant, or just from your imagination. Something dangerous flickered in Kinnick's eyes. He leaned closer still. I buried my sister 6 years ago because a female support soldier froze during an ambush. 14 men went in to save her. 2 came out. So yes, Sergeant, I know this from experience. And I will be damned if I let history repeat itself on my watch. He turned back to the map table, dismissing her with a shoulder. Get on your flight. Go home to your family. Leave the real work to people who can handle it. Tanaka grabbed Corinne's arm before she could respond, pulling her toward the door. They stepped outside into the biting cold, snow swirling around them in the dim light of the Afghan winter. He is never going to change his mind, Tanaka said. You know that. Corinne stared at the mountains in the distance, their peaks invisible against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, Nasiri and his team were fighting for their lives, waiting for help that might not come in time. You should go home, Tanaka continued, her voice softening. Your mother needs you. Your brother needs you. This is not your fight. Corinne thought about Wendell Hatch. She thought about the moment the bullets started flying and her finger would not move on the trigger. She thought about watching him take the rounds meant for her, watching him fall, watching the light leave his eyes while she sat frozen behind her scope. Nasiri was there that day, she said quietly. He saw what happened. He has never told anyone the truth about how Wendell died. Tanaka was silent for a moment. What is the truth? Corinne did not answer. She could not. The memory was a locked door she had spent 18 months refusing to open. The Operations Center door opened behind them, and Lieutenant Commander Vivian Ashcroft stepped out, her breath fogging in the cold. She was the officer who had approved Corinne's attachment to the unit over Kinnick's objections. A woman who had spent 20 years fighting the same battles Corinne was fighting now. Walk with me, Ashcroft said. They followed her around the side of the building, out of sight from the windows. Kinnick will not put you on a manifest, Ashcroft said. I cannot override him on operational decisions. But I can tell you that the weather window opens in 4 hours. Rescue element launches at 0300. She paused. I can also tell you that Warrant Officer Byrne is piloting the lead bird, and he is short a qualified sniper. Corinne understood what she was saying, and what she was not saying. If something goes wrong, Corinne said, you cannot protect me. If something goes wrong, Ashcroft replied, I will deny this conversation ever happened. She looked at Corinne with eyes that had seen too many good soldiers destroyed by bad politics. Nasiri's team has 7 confirmed survivors out of 12. They are running low on ammunition, and the Taliban is closing in. By morning, there will not be anyone left to rescue. Corinne looked back toward her barracks, where her packed bags waited, where her flight home waited, where her dying mother and her brother's wedding waited. Then she looked at Tanaka. "I'm coming with you," Tanaka said before Corinne could speak. "Someone has to watch your back." "Your ankle," Corinne started, "is fine." Tanaka's jaw was set. "You're not doing this alone." Corinne turned to Ashcroft. 0300. Ashcroft nodded once, then walked back toward the operations center without another word. The snow fell harder now, covering their tracks almost as quickly as they made them. The rotors of the MH-60 Blackhawk were already spinning when Corinne and Tanaka approached the flight line. Wind from the blades whipped snow into horizontal sheets, stinging exposed skin and reducing visibility to mere meters. Corinne kept her head down, rifle case slung across her back, moving with purpose toward the open side door of the helicopter. Warrant Officer Keegan Byrne stood beside the bird, conducting final checks with his crew chief. He was young for a pilot, maybe 28, with the kind of calm demeanor that came from logging too many hours in hostile airspace. He spotted Corinne approaching, and his expression shifted from confusion to recognition. "You are the sniper," he said over the rotor noise. "Frost." "I am." Byrne glanced toward the operations center, then back to her. "Kinnick did not put you on my manifest. Kinnick does not have a sniper on his rescue element. You're flying into a hornet's nest with no precision overwatch. How do you plan to extract 7 wounded operators when every ridgeline has Taliban fighters with clear lines of fire on your landing zone?" Byrne chewed on that for a moment. His crew chief, a stocky sergeant with a thick red beard, leaned in close to his ear and said something Corinne could not hear. Byrne nodded slowly. "Kinnick finds out you're on my bird, he'll have my wings." Corinne held his gaze. "Chief Nasiri and his team will be dead by sunrise if that landing zone is not secured. You know it. I know it. The only question is whether you want to fly home with survivors or body bags." The crew chief spoke up. "She has a point, sir. I have seen her shoot. She does not miss." Byrne looked at Tanaka. "And you?" "Spotter," Tanaka said. "We work as a team." The seconds stretched out. Snow accumulated on their shoulders. From inside the helicopter, Corinne could see the other members of the rescue element watching the exchange. 4 operators from the base quick reaction force, none of them happy about the delay. Byrne stepped aside and gestured toward the open door. "Find a seat. Keep your heads down until we are airborne. And if Kinnick asks, you were never on my bird." They climbed aboard and squeezed into the cramped cabin between cases of ammunition and medical supplies. The QRF operators eyed them with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. One of them, a sergeant with a shaved head and a scar running from his ear to his jaw, leaned forward. "You're the female sniper," he said. "The one Kinnick has been trying to get rid of." Corinne did not respond. She focused on securing her rifle case and checking her equipment. The sergeant continued. "Heard you froze up on a mission. Got your spotter killed." Tanaka stiffened beside her, but Corinne placed a hand on her arm. The accusation was nothing she had not heard before, nothing she had not told herself 1,000 times in the dark hours of the night. The helicopter lurched into the air, cutting off further conversation. Corinne pressed her face to the small window and watched FOB Resolute shrink below them, its lights fading into the swirling snow until there was nothing but darkness and the thunder of rotors. They flew low through the mountain passes, the pilots threading between peaks that rose invisible on either side. Turbulence rocked the cabin, violent enough to lift unsecured gear from the floor. Corinne braced herself against the bulkhead and ran through her mental checklist. Range cards, wind calculations, potential overwatch positions she remembered from her previous deployments to this region. 30 minutes into the flight, the radio crackled with an incoming transmission. The crew chief pressed his headset tighter and his face went pale. "Contact from the series team," he announced. "They are down to 7 effectives. Heavy casualties. Enemy forces estimated at 30 plus and closing from multiple directions. They're requesting immediate extraction, but report the primary LZ is compromised." Burns' voice came through the intercom. What about the secondary? Negative. Enemy has eyes on both positions. Any bird that tries to land will take heavy fire. Corinne keyed into the channel. What is their current position relative to the ridgeline? A pause. Then Burn answered. 800 meters southeast of the ridge. Open ground. No cover. She closed her eyes and visualized the terrain. She had walked those valleys. She had lain prone on those ridges for days at a time, watching, waiting, learning every fold in the earth. There's a tertiary position, she said. A dry riverbed 400 meters north of their current location. It is shielded from the eastern ridgeline by a rock formation. If they can make it there, you can extract them. The crew chief relayed the information. Seconds later, a response came back. Nasiri's voice, strained but steady. Frost, I should have known you would find a way onto this bird. Something loosened in her chest at the sound of his voice. I told you I would have your back, Chief. We cannot move to the riverbed without overwatch. The moment we break cover, they will cut us down. Then I will give you overwatch. Corinne turned to Burn. How close can you get me to the ridge? The pilot's laugh was humorless. In this weather, with that much enemy activity, maybe 500 meters. You would have to rope in under fire and make your way to a shooting position on foot. Then that is what I will do. The scarred sergeant spoke up again, his tone changed now. You're talking about inserting into hostile territory with no support. Just you and your spotter against 30-plus fighters. Corinne looked at him. I have done more with less. The helicopter banked hard, beginning its approach to the drop zone. Below them, muzzle flashes sparked in the darkness like deadly fireflies. The Taliban knew they were coming. Tanaka checked her weapon and met Corinne's eyes. Together. Together, Corinne replied. The crew chief kicked out the fast rope and the wind howled into the cabin like a living thing. The rope burned through Corinne's gloves as she descended into chaos. Tracer rounds streaked past the helicopter in glowing arcs, close enough that she could feel the heat of their passage. She hit the ground hard, rolled right, and came up with her rifle already sweeping for targets. Tanaka landed 3 seconds later, immediately taking a knee beside her. Go, go, go. Burns' voice crackled in her earpiece. We're taking fire. Cannot hold position. The rope snaked upward, and the Black Hawk banked away, its door gunner laying down suppressive fire as it disappeared into the snow and darkness. Then silence. Just the wind and the distant pop of gunfire from a series position. Corinne oriented herself quickly. They had landed in a shallow depression between 2 hills, temporary cover that would not last. The ridge she needed was 800 meters to the northeast, a brutal climb through rocky terrain crawling with enemy fighters. Moving northeast, she said into her radio. Going dark on comms until we reach overwatch position. She switched off her radio and began to move. Tanaka followed, favoring her left ankle but keeping pace. They communicated through hand signals now, the silent language they had developed over months of working together. The first 200 meters were the worst. Open ground with minimal cover, every step an invitation for a bullet. Corinne moved in short bursts, pausing behind boulders and in shallow depressions, scanning for movement before advancing again. The snow worked in their favor, muffling footsteps and reducing visibility for the enemy as much as for them. She spotted the first sentry at 300 meters. He was positioned behind a low stone wall, watching the valley below through a pair of old Soviet binoculars. His rifle rested against the wall beside him. Careless, Corinne raised her M2010 and settled the crosshairs on his chest. The suppressor reduced the shot to a muted thump, barely audible above the wind. The sentry slumped forward without a sound. Tanaka marked the position and they continued. The second sentry was more alert. He was patrolling a narrow path between rock formations, his weapon at the ready, head swiveling constantly. Corinne waited until he turned away from her position, then put a round through the base of his skull. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. 2 down, at least 28 to go. They reached the base of the ridge and began to climb. The terrain here was treacherous, loose shale covered with a thin layer of ice. Tanaka slipped twice, catching herself on jutting rocks, her jaw tight with pain. she refused to acknowledge. Corinne helped her over the worst sections without comment. There would be time for medical attention later. If there was a later. Halfway up the ridge, Corinne's radio crackled with an incoming transmission on the emergency frequency. Kinnick's voice filled her ear, tight with fury. "Sergeant O'Yelleran, I know you're out there. I am ordering you to return to base immediately. You are in direct violation of my orders, and you will face court-martial when this is over." Corinne did not respond. She kept climbing. Kinnick continued, "You're going to get yourself killed. You're going to get Tanaka killed. And for what? To prove something. To show everyone that you belong. This is not a game, Sergeant. This is not about your pride." She keyed her radio just long enough to say one word. "Climbing." Then she switched frequencies to Nasiri's channel. "Chief, I am 300 meters from Overwatch position. What is your status?" The response came through broken with static. "Frost, we are pinned down. Lost another man, try to move toward the riverbed. We cannot advance without cover. Hold your position. I will be in place in 10 minutes. The final push to the ridge was the steepest yet. Corinne's thighs burned and her lungs ached from the thin mountain air. Beside her, Tanaka was breathing hard but still moving, still fighting, still refusing to quit. They crested the ridge and found a natural shooting position behind a cluster of boulders. Corinne dropped prone and extended the bipod legs on her rifle while Tanaka set up beside her with the spotting scope. The valley spread out below them like a map of hell. She could see Nasiri's position now, a cluster of rocks where muzzle flashes sparked intermittently. Around them, closing from 3 directions, were the Taliban fighters. They moved in small groups, using the terrain for cover, tightening the noose with patient discipline. "I count 32 hostiles," Tanaka said quietly. "Maybe more in the dead ground to the east." Corinne adjusted her scope and began identifying priority targets. Leaders, machine gunners, anyone with a radio. She would work from the outside in, creating confusion and buying Nasiri's team room to breathe. She found her first target, a man with a Pecan machine gun setting up on a rock ledge with a clear line of fire on the SEAL position. 400 meters. Crosswind from the west at maybe 8 knots. She made her adjustments, exhaled slowly, and let the world narrow to a single point of focus. "Ready," Tanaka said. Corinne squeezed the trigger. The machine gunner's head snapped back, and he collapsed onto his weapon. In the sudden silence that followed, she could almost hear the confusion rippling through the enemy ranks. Then she found her second target and did it again. Corinne worked the bolt and found her third target, a fighter with a radio pressed to his ear, coordinating movements from behind a fallen tree. She dropped a mid-sentence and watched his comrades scatter for cover. For the next 6 minutes, she was not a woman or a soldier or a daughter missing Christmas. She was a machine. Acquire. Calculate. Fire. Repeat. Each shot bought Nasiri's team another few seconds of breathing room. Each body that fell created another gap in the tightening noose. 11 confirmed, Tanaka reported. They're pulling back from the eastern approach. But even as she spoke, new muzzle flashes erupted from the southern ridge. Reinforcements. The Taliban had anticipated a rescue attempt and positioned reserves to counter it. "Frost," Nasiri's voice came through strained with exhaustion. "We are attempting to move toward the riverbed. Can you cover our 6? Corinne shifted her position, scanning the terrain behind the SEAL team. "Copy. I have eyes on your route. Moving now." She watched through her scope as Nasiri's men began their push. 7 figures emerged from the rocks, 2 of them dragging wounded teammates. They moved in pairs, covering each other, professional even in desperation. Corinne recognized the youngest among them from briefings. Petty Officer 2nd Class Deshaun Mobley, 23 years old, on his first combat deployment. Mobley was half-carrying another SEAL whose leg was wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. They were the slowest pair, falling behind the others. Easy targets. Hostile, 2 o'clock from Mobley's position, Tanaka called out. 150 meters and closing. Corinne found him. A fighter emerging from a gully with his rifle raised, moving to intercept. She fired, and he crumpled. But there were more behind him. 3 more. Then 5. "They are flanking from the south," she said. "Nasiri, You have hostiles converging on your rear. We see them, Nasiri replied. Mobley, get Torres to cover. Everyone else saw me. What happened next would stay with Corinne for the rest of her life. Mobley pushed Torres behind a boulder and turned to provide covering fire. At the same moment, a Taliban fighter rose from concealment less than 30 meters away and opened up with an automatic weapon. Mobley went down. Torres, despite his shattered leg, crawled from cover and threw himself over Mobley's body, shielding him with his own flesh. The fighter kept shooting. Torres jerked with each impact, and Corinne could not get a clear shot because Mobley and Torres were directly in her line of fire. She watched Torres die. She watched him take round after round while trying to protect his teammate, and she could do nothing. No. The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. Tanaka gripped her arm, but she shook it off, searching desperately for an angle. The shooter was moving now, advancing toward the two fallen Americans, and if she did not stop him in the next 3 seconds, he would finish them both. She found a gap, 12 inches of clear space between a rock and Mobley's helmet. The shooter's torso crossed that gap for a fraction of a second. She fired. The round caught him in the chest, and he went down. But the damage was done. Torres was motionless, his body still covering Mobley. The young SEAL was struggling to move, to push his dead teammate off, to raise his weapon against the enemies still closing in. Nasiri reached him first, pulling Torres's body aside and dragging Mobley to cover. The remaining SEALs formed a perimeter, their ammunition running critical. They were still 200 meters from the riverbed. 200 meters of open ground with enemies on 3 sides. Frost, Nasiri said, and his voice cracked in a way she had never heard before. Torres is gone. I know. I saw. I need you to clear a path. Whatever it takes. Corinne blinked hard and forced herself to focus. Grief was a luxury. Guilt was a weight she would carry later. Right now, there were still 6 men alive down there, and they needed her. She found her next target and fired. Then another. Then another. But the Taliban had located her position now. Mortar rounds began landing on the ridge, explosions throwing rock and snow into the air. The first was 50 meters short. The second was 30 meters to her left. They are bracketing us, Tanaka said. We need to move. Corinne fired one more shot, then grabbed her rifle and rolled away from her position just as the third mortar round landed exactly where she had been lying. The explosion threw her sideways and filled her ears with ringing silence. She crawled through the debris, choking on dust and smoke. Her hands found Tanaka's arm, and she pulled her along, moving downhill towards secondary cover she had identified earlier. Behind them, more rounds impacted, walking across the ridge like the footsteps of an angry giant. They reached a shallow cave in the rock face and pressed themselves inside. Corinne's hands were shaking. When she looked at them, she saw Wendell Hatch's blood, even though it had been washed away 18 months ago. Frost. Tanaka's voice was distant through the ringing. Frost, stay with me. Corinne closed her eyes and saw Torres dying. She saw Hatch dying. She saw herself frozen behind the scope, unable to move, unable to act, while the people who trusted her fell one by one. Not again, she whispered. Please, not again. Tanaka grabbed Corinne's face with both hands and forced eye contact. Her voice cut through the ringing and the panic and the ghosts. Look at me. You are not there. You are here. You are Sergeant First Class Corinne O'Yelleran, and you do not freeze. You adapt. You overcome. Now breathe. Corinne sucked in a ragged breath. Then another. The shaking in her hands began to subside. Torres is dead because I cannot get the angle, she said, just like Wendell. Tanaka shook her head firmly. Torres is dead because he chose to shield his teammate. That was his decision, his sacrifice. You do not get to take that from him by making it about your guilt. Before Corinne could respond, her radio crackled with Nasiri's voice. He was speaking on a private channel, one they had established months ago for communications they did not want anyone else to hear. Frost, I need you to listen to me. I know what is happening in your head right now. I know because I was there when Hatch died. And there is something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Corinne pressed the radio closer to her ear. The mortar barrage had stopped. In the silence, Nasiri's words carried the weight of 18 months of unspoken truth. Hatch did not die because you froze, he said. He died because he chose to. When those fighters flanked your position, he saw them before you did. He had time to warn you. He had time to pull you back. But he knew if he did that, both of you would die. So he made a decision. Corinne's throat tightened. What decision? He stood up. Deliberately. He drew their fire away from you because he knew you would survive if he did not. His last words to me, before the medevac, were to make sure you never blamed yourself. He said you were the best shooter he had ever seen, and he was not going to let you die in that valley. Nasiri paused. He made me promise to tell you someday. I just never found the right time. The words hit her like a physical blow. For 18 months, she had carried the belief that her hesitation had killed her spotter. For 18 months, she had punished herself with guilt that belonged to no one. Wendell Hatch had not died because she failed. He had died because he chose to save her. Why did you not tell me? She whispered. Because you were not ready to hear it. You needed to believe you could fail. It made you sharper, more careful. But right now, Frost, I need you to understand that Wendell Hatch died believing in you. And if you let that sacrifice mean nothing by falling apart on this ridge, then you are betraying everything he gave his life for. Corinne closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw Hatch's face. Not dying, not bloody. She saw him at the range, correcting her breathing. She saw him in the mess hall, laughing at his own terrible jokes. She saw him a morning before that final mission, telling her she was going to be the best sniper in the Army someday. She opened her eyes, and the shaking was gone. Where do you need me? She said. Nasiri's relief was audible. There is a secondary ridge 200 meters west of your position. It has a clear line of sight to the riverbed. If you can get there and cover our movement, we can make the extraction point. I'm moving now. Frost, one more thing. Go ahead. Thank you for coming back. She did not respond because there was nothing to say. She had never really had a choice. Corinne grabbed her rifle and nodded to Tanaka. They emerged from the shallow cave into a landscape transformed by mortar fire. Craters pocked the snow. Smoke drifted across the ridge like morning fog. But the Taliban had shifted their attention back to Nasiri's team, assuming the sniper threat had been neutralized. They were wrong. Corinne moved fast now, faster than she should have with an injured spotter struggling to keep up. But time was measured in heartbeats, and they had already spent too many. The western ridge rose ahead of them, a dark mass against the pre-dawn sky. They climbed in silence, conserving breath for the effort. Tanaka's ankle was swelling visibly now, but she did not complain. She never complained. It was one of the things Corinne loved about her. At the top of the ridge, Corinne found a perfect shooting position. A natural depression in the rock provided cover while offering an unobstructed view of the valley floor. She could see the riverbed now, a dark ribbon cutting through the snow. She could see the path Nasiri's team would have to take, and she could see the enemy positions arrayed against them. At least 20 fighters still active, with more arriving from the village to the east. This is it, Tanaka said quietly, settling in beside her with the spotting scope. One way or another, this is where it ends. Corinne chambered around and steadied her breathing. It ends with them going home, she said. All of them. She found her first target and prepared to fire. On my mark, Nasiri said through the radio. 3, 2, 1. Moving. The SEALs broke from cover and began their final push toward salvation. Corinne started shooting. The first 3 shots came so fast they sounded like a single sustained crack of thunder. 3 fighters dropped in the space of 2 heartbeats, their bodies crumpling into the snow before their comrades understood what was happening. Target down at 410 meters, Tanaka called. Adjusting wind. Come left point 3. Corinne made the adjustment without conscious thought and fired again. Another body fell. The SEALs were moving now, a staggered line of desperate men pushing through knee-deep snow toward the riverbed. Nasiri led from the front, his weapon up, dropping any fighter who got too close. Behind him, Mobley had recovered enough to move under his own power, though he stumbled every few steps. 2 tangos, flanking from your 9, Corinne said into the radio. I have them. She shifted her aim and eliminated both threats before they could reach firing positions. The Taliban fighters were starting to panic now, caught between the SEAL team advancing from one direction and the invisible death raining down from the ridge. "This is insane," Tanaka muttered. "You're shooting faster than anyone I have ever seen." Less talking, more spotting. The words came out sharper than she intended, but Tanaka just grinned. "There she is. Welcome back, Frost." Corinne allowed herself a half-second of grim satisfaction before returning to work. The SEALs had covered half the distance to the riverbed. 60 meters to go. But the Taliban were regrouping now, their initial shock giving way to disciplined response. A squad of fighters had taken cover behind a stone wall and were laying down suppressive fire that forced Nasiri's team to ground. "I need that wall cleared," Nasiri said. "Working on it." But the angle was wrong. The fighters were using the wall effectively, exposing only the tops of their heads for brief moments. Corinne could hit them, but it would take time. Time the SEALs did not have. Then she noticed something. A gap in a mortar at the base of the wall. A structural weakness that had been there for decades, maybe centuries. If she could hit it at the right angle, with the right amount of force, the whole section might collapse. "Tanaka," she said, "I need you to calculate for penetration at the base of that wall. Half-meter below ground level." Tanaka stared at her. "You want to shoot through the wall. I want to bring it down on them." A pause while Tanaka worked the numbers in her head. "Come up 2.5. Account for ricochet deflection." Corinne adjusted and fired. The round punched through the weakened mortar, and something shifted in the ancient stonework. She fired again, same spot. A crack appeared, running upward through the wall like a lightning bolt frozen in stone. Third shot. The wall collapsed. 3 fighters went down under the rubble. The survivors scrambled for new cover, but they were exposed now, panicked, easy targets. Corinne dropped 2 more before they made it 10 meters. "Path is clear," she said. "Nasiri, move now." The SEALs surged forward. 30 meters to the riverbed. 20. 10. They made it. One by one, they dropped into the dry channel and pressed themselves against the earthen banks. Protected. Hidden. Safe for the moment. "Frost." Nasiri's voice was ragged with exhaustion and relief. "I do not know how you just did that. You could buy me a drink when we get home." "A drink? I will buy you a distillery." Corinne allowed herself to breathe. The immediate crisis had passed, but they were not out yet. The extraction helicopters were still 20 minutes away, and the Taliban were not going to simply let their prey escape. She scanned the terrain, counting remaining threats. 12 fighters still active that she could see. Probably more in the village preparing to reinforce. And then her scope swept across something that made her blood freeze. A technical. A Toyota pickup with a mounted DSHK heavy machine gun, rolling down from the eastern hills toward a position that would give it a clear line of fire on the riverbed. One burst from that weapon would tear through the SEALs like paper. "We have a problem," Tanaka said, seeing it too. "I see it. That thing gets into position. The helicopters cannot land. They will be shredded before they touch down." Corinne tracked the technical as it bounced along the rough terrain. The gunner was already manning the weapon, ready to fire the moment they had a clear angle. The driver was pushing hard, knowing every second mattered. "Range to target," Corinne said. Tanaka worked her scope. 1,100 meters. And the crosswind just picked up. "I am reading gusts at 15 knots. 1,100 meters. In shifting wind. At a moving target." It was an almost impossible shot under perfect conditions. Under these conditions, it was suicide. But if she did not take it, 6 men were going to die. She settled into her position and began her calculations. Bullet drop at that range. Wind deflection. The vehicle's speed and direction. The rotation of the earth itself, which mattered at distances this extreme. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. A winter day in North Dakota 30 years ago. "The cold is your friend, Corinne. It makes you still." She became still. "One shot," Tanaka said quietly. "That is all we have time for. Make it count." Corinne exhaled slowly and placed her finger on the trigger. The world contracted to a single point of focus. The technical bouncing across the terrain. The gunner's silhouette against the gray sky. The wind cutting across the valley in unpredictable gusts. Corinne's breathing slowed until her heartbeat was the loudest sound in her universe. She counted the rhythm. 1 beat, 2 beats. Between the second and third, in that moment of perfect stillness, she would fire. Wind is shifting, Tanaka said, now reading 12 knots. No, 14. It is all over the place. The technical was getting closer to its firing position. Maybe 30 seconds before it would have a clear angle on the riverbed. 30 seconds before 6 men would be torn apart by heavy caliber rounds. Corinne made a decision. She stopped calculating. She stopped thinking. She let her body remember the 10,000 shots she had taken before this one. Let muscle memory guide what conscious thought could not. Her father had called it the quiet place, that space beyond technique where shooting became something closer to instinct. She had not found it since Hatch died, had not trusted herself enough to let go. But Hatch had died so she could live, and she was done letting his sacrifice mean nothing. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, spinning through the frigid air, rising and falling along its ballistic arc. For one eternal second, the outcome hung, suspended between success and failure. The gunner's head snapped back. His body slumped over the weapon. The technical swerved as the driver reacted to his partner's sudden death, and for a moment Corinne thought they might crash. But the driver regained control and kept coming. Another fighter climbed into the truck bed, scrambling toward the unmanned gun. Corinne worked the bolt. Her hands moved without hesitation. She found a new target, adjusted for the vehicle's changed trajectory, and fired again. The second gunner fell before his hands touched the weapon. The technical stopped. The driver threw open his door and ran, abandoning the vehicle in the middle of the open ground. Corinne let him go. He was no longer a threat. Tanaka let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour. 2 shots, 1,100 meters. In that wind. I have never seen anything like that. Neither have I, Corinne admitted. Her hands were trembling again, but this time it was not fear. It was adrenaline. It was a release of tension so extreme that her body did not know how to process it. Nasiri's voice came through the radio, thick with emotion. Frost, I do not have words. Save them for later. You still have hostiles in the area, and extraction is 15 minutes out. She scanned the remaining fighters through her scope. The 2 impossible shots had broken something in them. They were pulling back now, retreating toward the village rather than pressing the attack. They had come to slaughter trapped Americans, and instead they had been decimated by a ghost they could not see, could not find, could not fight. Command frequency crackled with a new voice, one she had not expected. Sergeant O'Yelleran, this is Master Sergeant Kinnick. Corinne hesitated before responding. Go ahead, Master Sergeant. A long pause. When Kinnick spoke again, the contempt was gone from his voice. Something else had replaced it. Something that sounded almost like respect. I have been monitoring your engagement, watching the kill confirmations come in. He paused again. Get them home, Sergeant. That was all. No apology. No admission that he had been wrong. But from Kinnick, those 4 words were more than she ever expected to receive. Copy that, she said. Frost out. Tanaka was staring at her with something like awe. Did Kinnick just give you his blessing? Sounded like it. Hell really has frozen over. Corinne almost smiled. Almost. But there was still work to do. She returned to her scope and continued scanning. The extraction helicopters would arrive soon, but 15 minutes was an eternity in combat. Anything could happen. Anyone could die. Movement caught her eye, not from the retreating fighters or the disabled technical, from a village itself. A single figure moving between the buildings with purpose, heading toward the riverbed on a path that would bring him dangerously close to Nasiri's position. She tracked him, trying to understand what she was seeing. He was not carrying a rifle. His hands were empty, held slightly away from his body. His clothing was bulky, unusually so for the weather, and he was moving with the steady, deliberate pace of someone who had already accepted death. Tanaka, she said quietly, tell me what you see at bearing 045. Single individual. 600 meters. Tanaka swung her scope. For a moment she was silent. Then her voice came out flat and cold. Suicide bombe. He is wearing a vest. I can see the outline under his coat. Corinne's crosshairs found the man's chest. Easy shot. 600 meters. No wind obstruction. Stationary target. She could drop him right now and end the threat. But he was not alone. As she watched, two children emerged from a doorway and began walking beside him. A boy and a girl, neither older than 8. They were holding his hands, looking up at him with trusting eyes. He was using them as shields. I did not have a clean shot, Corinne said. The bomber kept walking. The children kept pace. And the riverbed where 6 Americans waited for rescue grew closer with every step. The bomber was 400 meters from the riverbed now. The children clung to his hands, oblivious to the death strapped beneath his coat. Corinne tracked him through her scope, searching desperately for an angle that did not exist. Nasiri, she said into the radio, you have a suicide bomber approaching from the northeast. 400 meters and closing. He is using children as cover. I cannot take the shot. A pause. Then Nasiri's voice, grim and steady. Can you slow him down? Not without risking the kids. Options raced through her mind. She could shoot low, try to hit his legs, but a wounded bomber could still detonate. She could wait until the children separated from him, but they showed no sign of releasing his hands. She could warn them off with a shot nearby, but that might trigger the detonation. Every option ended with dead children or dead SEALs, or both. Frost, Tanaka said, what are you thinking? Corinne did not answer. She was already moving, pushing herself up from her shooting position and slinging her rifle across her back. What are you doing? Tanaka demanded. I'm going down there. That is insane. You will never make it in time. I'm not going to shoot him. I'm going to stop him. She was running before Tanaka could argue further, scrambling down the ridge toward the valley floor. The terrain was brutal, loose rock and ice threatening to send her tumbling with every step. She did not slow down. Behind her, Tanaka's voice came through the radio. I am repositioning to cover you. If you can separate him from those kids, give me a clear shot, I will take it. Corinne did not have breath to respond. She was calculating distances in her head. 300 meters to descend, then 200 meters across open ground to intercept the bomber's path. She had maybe 3 minutes before he reached the riverbed. She made it down the ridge in 90 seconds, her lungs burning and her legs screaming. The valley floor spread before her, a nightmare of snow and rock and scattered bodies from the earlier fighting. She oriented herself and started running. The bomber saw her coming. He stopped walking. The children looked up at him in confusion as he released their hands and said something in Pashto. They hesitated, then turned and ran back toward the village, away from the explosion that was coming. Corinne slowed to a walk. She was 50 meters from him now, close enough to see the wires emerging from his collar, close enough to see the dead certainty in his eyes. She held her hands away from her body, showing she was not reaching for a weapon. Her rifle was still slung across her back, useless at this range anyway. The bomber watched her approach. His hand moved to his chest, fingers curling around something beneath his coat. The detonator. Corinne stopped 10 meters from him. She could see now that he was young, maybe 20. There was no hatred in his face, only resignation. She spoke in broken Pashto, the fragments she had learned over 4 deployments. Please, children gone. Only you and me now. No need for death. The young man tilted his head, studying her. An American woman, alone, unarmed, speaking his language. She was not what he expected. You are a soldier, he said in halting English. You killed my brothers today. Yes, Corinne said. I did. Why you come here? Why you not shoot me from mountain? Because I do not want to kill you. And I do not want you to kill yourself. His hand tightened on the detonator. I'm already dead. I die for God. For my people. Corinne took a slow step closer. Your people are the children you just released. Your people are the families in that village who will suffer when more soldiers come seeking revenge. Your death will not save them. It will only bring more death. The young man's eyes flickered. Doubt perhaps, or just surprised that she was still talking instead of shooting. From her earpiece, Tanaka's voice came urgent and low. Frost, I have a shot. His head is clear. Say the word. Corinne did not respond. She took another step forward. I have a mother, she said. She is dying. I was supposed to go home to see her, to say goodbye. Instead, I am here, talking to you, because I believe your life has value. Even now, even after everything. The bomber's hand trembled on the detonator. What is your name? He asked. Corinne. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I am Farhan. Farhan. That is a good name. It means happiness. His laugh was bitter and broken. There is no happiness here. Then come with me and find some. Put down the detonator. Walk away. You do not have to die today. For one endless moment, she thought he might actually do it. His hand loosened on the device. His shoulders sagged. The resignation in his eyes gave way to something that looked almost like hope. Then a shot cracked across the valley. Farhan jerked. His eyes went wide with shock. He looked down at the red bloom spreading across his chest, then back up at Corinne. He fell. Corinne spun, searching for the shooter. Not Tanaka. The angle was wrong. Someone else. From the riverbed. Mobley lowered his rifle. He had crawled up the bank and taken a shot himself, not knowing what Corinne was trying to do, only seeing a bomber and an American in danger. The detonator tumbled from Farhan's limp hand and landed in the snow, unfired. Corinne stood alone in the silence, staring at the young man's body. He had been so close to choosing life. So close. Above her, the sound of helicopter rotors began to build. The Blackhawks thundered into the valley like angels of deliverance. Two birds, door gunners already laying down suppressive fire on the remaining Taliban positions. Snow swirled in violent cyclones beneath the rotors as the first helicopter touched down near the riverbed. Corinne stood motionless over Farhan's body. The world felt distant, muffled, like she was watching everything through frosted glass. She should move. She knew she should move, but her legs would not obey. Frost. Tanaka's voice in her earpiece, sharp with concern. Frost, you need to get to the extraction point. Now. She forced herself to turn away from the young man who had almost chosen to live. One step, then another. Her body remembered how to function even when her mind wanted to shut down. The SEALs were already loading onto the first helicopter. Nasiri stood at the riverbank, waving her toward them, his mouth forming words she could not hear over the rotor wash. She broke into a run. Mobley intercepted her halfway there. His face was pale, his eyes searching hers for something. Forgiveness, maybe. Understanding. I saw the vest, he shouted over the noise. I saw him reaching for the detonator. I thought he was going to blow you up. Corinne looked at him. 23 years old. First deployment. He had made the call he thought was right. She could not fault him for that. Could not explain the complexity of what had been happening in those final seconds. You did your job, she said. That is all any of us can do. She kept moving before he could respond. Nasiri grabbed her arm as she reached the helicopter and pulled her aboard. His grip was fierce, almost painful, the hold of a man who had been certain he was watching her die. Never do that again, he said in her ear. No promises. The helicopter lifted off. Corinne pressed herself against the bulkhead and let her head fall back, eyes closed. The vibration of the aircraft rattled through her bones. Around her, the surviving SEALs sat in exhausted silence, each man processing the night's horrors in his own way. She felt Nasiri settle beside her. His shoulder touched hers, a point of warmth in the cold cabin. How long were you going to stand there talking to him? He asked. As long as it took. He could have detonated at any moment. I know. Nasiri was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Hatch would have done the same thing. Run down there like a crazy person, try to talk his way out of an impossible situation. He always said you were too similar for your own good. Corinne opened her eyes. The memory of her spotter felt different now. Less like a wound and more like a scar. Still there, still part of her, but no longer bleeding. The second helicopter lifted off behind them, carrying Tanaka and the remaining personnel. The extraction was complete. Against all odds, they were going home. Then Corinne felt something wet against her side. She looked down and saw blood soaking through her jacket. Her blood, a neat hole in the fabric just above her hip, the edges singed dark. When did that happen? She said, more confused than alarmed. Nasiri's eyes went wide. Medic, he shouted. I need a medic now. Hands descended on her, pulling open her jacket, exposing the wound. A through and through, the medic announced. Missed the major organs, but she is losing blood. I need pressure here. Corinne tried to remember when she had been hit. The descent down the ridge. The run across the valley. The confrontation with Farhan. At some point a bullet had found her, and she had not even noticed. Adrenaline, the medic said, reading her confusion. You will be amazed what the body can ignore when survival is on the line. Stay with me, Sergeant. We are 20 minutes from a base. The world was going gray at the edges now. Blood loss catching up with her. She felt Nasiri take her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers. Stay with me, Frost. That is an order. Since when do I take orders from Navy? She mumbled. His laugh was choked with fear. Since right now. Stay awake. Talk to me. About what? Tell me about your brother's wedding. Tell me about going home. She tried to focus on his face, but it kept blurring. My brother Deo. He is marrying a woman named Adiz. They met at a hospital fundraiser. My mother says she talks too much, but she loves her anyway. Keep going. The wedding is on the 27th. My mother wants me to wear a dress. I do not own any dresses. We will get you a dress, Nasiri said. The most beautiful dress in Minnesota. Corinne smiled. That is a low bar. Have you seen how people dress in Minnesota? The helicopter banked hard, and the motion sent a spike of pain through her side. She gasped, and her grip on Nasiri's hand tightened. Almost there, the medic said. 2 minutes to landing. Stay with me, Sergeant. The lights of FOB Resolute appeared through the window, growing closer. Corinne watched them approach, each one a small promise of safety, of survival, of the chance to keep the promises she had made. Mama, she whispered, I'm coming home. Then the world went dark. Corinne woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of a heart monitor. The ceiling above her was canvas, rippling slightly in the wind. Field Hospital. She was still at FOB Resolute. She tried to sit up, and pain lanced through her side, sharp enough to steal her breath. Easy. A hand pressed gently against her shoulder, guiding her back down. Tanaka's face appeared above her, tired but smiling. You took a bullet, remember. The doctors say you're lucky it missed everything important. How long was I out? 6 hours. It is almost noon on the 23rd. The 23rd. 1 day before her flight home. 1 day before Christmas Eve. The SEALs, Corinne said. Did everyone make it? Everyone who was alive when you started shooting. Tanaka's smile faded slightly. Torres did not make it, but the other 6 are going home because of you. Corinne closed her eyes. Torres, shielding Mobley with his body. Another ghost to carry. Another name to remember. The tent flap opened and Colonel Marcus Whitfield stepped inside, followed by Master Sergeant Kinnick. Corinne forced herself to focus despite the fog of painkillers clouding her thoughts. Sergeant O'Yelleran, Whitfield said, How are you feeling? Ready to get back to work, sir? Whitfield almost smiled. I doubt that very much. He glanced at Kinnick, then back to her. We have a situation to discuss. Master Sergeant Kinnick has filed a report regarding your actions last night. Here it comes, Corinne thought. The court-martial. The end of her career. She had known the price when she climbed onto that helicopter uninvited. The report details multiple instances of insubordination, Whitfield continued. Unauthorized boarding of a military aircraft. Disobeying direct orders from a superior NCO. Operating outside the established chain of command. Yes, sir, Corinne said. All of that is accurate. Whitfield studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Kinnick. Master Sergeant, would you like to add anything? Kinnick stepped forward. His face was unreadable, carved from the same stone as always. But something in his eyes had changed. The contempt was gone. In its place was something she had never expected to see directed at her. Respect. I would like to amend my report, sir, Kinnick said. Upon further review of the engagement data and testimony from the surviving SEAL team members, I am recommending that Sergeant O'Yelleran be considered for the Bronze Star with Valor. Corinne stared at him. The words did not make sense. They could not make sense. Kinnick met her gaze. You made 27 confirmed kills in a 4-hour engagement. You disabled an enemy technical at 1,100 meters under extreme conditions. You descended from a secured position to personally confront a suicide bomber, an action that allowed 2 civilian children to escape unharmed. He paused. I was wrong about you, Sergeant, and I do not say that often. Whitfield nodded. The recommendation has been forwarded to Division. Given the circumstances, I expect it will be approved. He reached into his pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. In the meantime, your medical evacuation has been authorized. There is a transport leaving for Ramstein in 4 hours. From there, you can catch a flight stateside. Corinne took the paper with trembling fingers. I can still make it home. You can still make it home, Whitfield confirmed. Merry Christmas, Sergeant. They left her alone with Tanaka, who was grinning like she had just won the lottery. Bronze Star, Tanaka said. Not bad for a night's work. Corinne shook her head slowly. I do not care about the medal. I care about seeing my family. I know. Tanaka's expression softened. That is why I already packed your bags. They are on the transport. All you have to do is get there. The tent flap opened again, and this time it was Nasiri. He was cleaned up, wearing fresh utilities, but exhaustion still carved deep lines around his eyes. Behind him came the rest of his team. Mobley, the others whose names she had not learned, but whose lives she had saved. They filed into the small space until there was barely room to breathe. And then, one by one, they snapped to attention. Mobley stepped forward first. He was young, so young, and there were tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. Sergeant O'Yelleran, he said, on behalf of the team, I want to thank you. We would not be standing here without you. He saluted. The others followed. 6 men, saluting a woman lying in a hospital bed, honoring her in the way warriors honor their own. Corinne did not have words. She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. Nasiri waited until the others had filed out before approaching her bed. He sat on the edge, careful not to jostle her wounded side. I meant what I said on the helicopter, he told her quietly. Hatcher be proud. Corinne reached out and took his hand. Thank you for telling me the truth, for giving me the chance to forgive myself. He squeezed her fingers. Go home, Frost. Hug your mother. Watch your brother get married. And when you are ready, come back. There is always a place for you here. She held onto his hand for a moment longer, memorizing the warmth of it. Then she let go. I will see you on the other side, Chief. Nasiri smiled. Count on it. The transport to Ramstein was cold and loud and perfect. Corinne slept through most of it, her body demanding rest that her mind had refused to allow for the past 48 hours. She woke somewhere over Europe with her side aching and her heart lighter than it had been in 18 months. From Germany, she caught a military flight to Dover. From Dover, a commercial connection to Minneapolis. 26 hours of travel, crossing 9 time zones, racing the sun westward toward home. She landed at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport at 7 in the morning on Christmas Day. The terminal was nearly empty. A few travelers shuffled between gates, bleary-eyed and clutching coffee cups. Christmas music played softly from overhead speakers, familiar carols that she had not heard in 3 years. Corinne walked slowly, her wound protesting each step, her army dress uniform drawing occasional glances from civilians who did not know what to make of a soldier on Christmas morning. She found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone. 12 missed calls from Deo. 8 from her father. None from her mother. Her fingers trembled as she dialed her brother's number. He answered on the first ring. Corinne. His voice cracked on her name. Where are you? Minneapolis. I just landed. I'm coming home. A sound came through the phone that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. She could not tell. You need to hurry, Deo said. Mama took a turn yesterday. She is at the hospital. The doctors say it could be any time now. The words hit her like a bullet she had not seen coming. Corinne gripped the phone harder. I'm on my way. She found a taxi outside the terminal, an older driver with kind eyes who took one look at her uniform and her face and asked no questions. Snow was falling gently, blanketing the city in white. The streets were empty, everyone home with their families, and the taxi cut through the silence like a ship through calm water. The hospital rose ahead of them, a tower of glass and concrete against the gray sky. Corinne paid the driver and did not wait for change. She moved through the lobby as fast as her wound would allow. A nurse at the reception desk recognized the urgency in her eyes and directed her to the fourth floor without asking for identification. The elevator was too slow. She took the stairs. Room 412. The door was slightly open. Corinne paused outside, suddenly terrified. She had faced snipers and suicide bombers and impossible odds, but this door was the hardest thing she had ever had to walk through. She pushed it open. Her mother lay in the bed, smaller than Corinne remembered, fragile in a way that broke something inside her chest. Machines beeped softly. Tubes ran from her arms. But her eyes were open, and when she saw Corinne standing in the doorway, her face transformed. "My baby girl," she whispered. Corinne crossed the room in 3 steps and took her mother's hand. The skin was paper-thin, cool to the touch, but the grip that closed around her fingers was stronger than she expected. "I promised I would come," Corinne said. Her voice broke on the words. "I promised." Her father rose from a chair in the corner and wrapped his arms around her from behind. He smelled like coffee and the cologne he had worn her entire life. Her brother appeared beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his fiancée, Adiz, standing quietly behind him. The whole family, together, on Christmas morning. Her mother reached up and touched Corinne's face with trembling fingers. "You look tired," she said. "Have you been eating enough?" Corinne laughed through her tears. "I've been busy, Mama. Too busy to eat. That is what is wrong with the army. They do not feed you properly. Some things never changed." Her mother could be on her deathbed and still worry about whether her children were eating enough. They stayed like that for hours, the 5 of them crowded into the small room. Deo told stories about wedding preparations and the chaos of dealing with 300 relatives. Adiz showed Corinne pictures of the dress she would wear and the flowers she had chosen. Her father held her mother's hand and looked at his daughter with pride that needed no words. And Corinne told them about the snow in Afghanistan, about the mountains that looked like they touched heaven, about friends who had her back and a mission that had mattered. She did not tell them about the kills or the bomber or the bullet wound hidden beneath her uniform. Some stories were not for families. Some stories she would carry alone. As the afternoon light faded toward evening, her mother's eyes grew heavy. But before she drifted into sleep, she squeezed Corinne's hand one more time. "I am so proud of you," she said. "My warrior daughter. You came home. I will always come home, Mama. Always." Her mother smiled and closed her eyes. Corinne sat beside her bed as the snow continued to fall outside the window. Christmas lights twinkled from the buildings across the street. Somewhere, church bells were ringing. Her phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at the screen. "Merry Christmas, Frost. Hatch will be proud. See you on the other side. Nasiri." She smiled, the first real smile in what felt like forever. The war would still be there when she returned. The danger and the sacrifice and the endless fight. But right now, in this moment, she was exactly where she needed to be. Home, with her family, keeping the promise that mattered most. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the world in white, making everything clean and new again. If this story moved you, drop a comment and let us know what resonated most. Have you ever had to choose between duty and the people you love? We would love to hear your story.